Access denied. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted.
So what is the use case diagram? It is a diagram meant to showcase the relationship between the users of the system and the actions that they can perform in your system. So this includes things such as logging in, such as opening or changing settings, things such as let's say making a purchase if it is a shopping app, or making an order if it is a food delivery app. So let us go over the parts of the use case diagram. Let us start with the actor. The actor, as seen here, is a stickman figure and is represented by a noun. So these are the users of your system. These are the people who will directly interact with your system. So the other users of your system can be people such as teachers, they can be admin or administrators, they can be people such as employees or managers, and so on. So these are the people who will interact with your system. Take note, do not just use the word users. That is way too vague. So try to be somewhat specific with what type of user you are talking about. On the other hand, do not be too specific. Do not put actual names such as John or Maria or whatnot. You give more general categories, so student, teachers, and so on. That is the actor. Again, they are the people who will interact with your system. Use case. This is shown to be in oblong and it's represented by a verb. So as you can see here, we have here the use case add subject. So these are the actions that the user can perform in your system. Use cases are all of the actions. For example, in an enrollment system, what can the user do or what can the student do? So obviously they can add a subject, they can drop a subject, they can enroll, they can choose their strand if they are enrolling for the first time or they are a new student, things like that. So that is what we mean by a use case. It is the actions that your user can perform. Take note, the syntax of this is it's written similar to a method or a function in a software, but this is not always the case. If you're making a use case diagram for, let's say, a advertisement or maybe guidelines or maybe a non-software related system, you can make use of verbs or simply put actions. For example, for a advertisement, what are some actions that you can do with relation to your advertisement? Obviously, you can view your advertisement. You can also, let's say, share your advertisement, or you can download your advertisement. So those are some examples of use cases. Again, they do not always have to be actions that are in the form of methods or functions. But if you are creating a software application, so a mobile app, a desktop app, etc., as much as possible, try to use actual methods or actual functions that are in your system. If you do not have any specific functions or you have too many, you can categorize them or generalize them. So instead of having 3 functions for add subject, you can just say that these are the add subject functions. Okay? Relationship. This is represented by a line with an arrowhead at the end. So this denotes a relationship between your actors and your use cases. In other words, if that specific actor interacts with that specific use case, then you draw a line between them or an arrow between them. Does this mean that there can be multiple use cases and multiple actors? Yes. Does this mean that an actor does not have to interact with all the use cases? Yes. So you can have use cases. You can have, let's say, 5 use cases and 2 actors, and those 2 actors do not have to interact with all 5 use cases. So that is what this relationship line means. Take note though that you must have all your use cases interact with an actor. In other words, if one of your use cases is not interacting with any actor, then you simply remove it because it is not really part anymore of the use case diagram. Okay, we have here the include and extend relationship. So what are these two? The include relationship and extend relationship are used to denote a relationship between 2 use cases. So this solid line is meant to be for an actor in a use case, but the broken line here, or the dashed line, is meant to denote a relationship between 2 use cases in your system. So include relationship talks about a relationship where 2 use cases will function at the same time. In other words, if the parent here, so this is the parent use case, if the parent here is called by the user, if the user tries to log in, then it will call the child use case, which is verify password. In other words, whenever the user tries to log in, it will always try to verify the password. The user or the system will always try to check the password if it is correct. So that is what this means by the include relationship. The child use case will always run when the parent use case is called. On the other hand, the extend relationship means that the parent use case, which is login, will only call the child use case in specific conditions, which is in this case show error message. So what does this mean? The user logs in. Let's say they enter an incorrect password. They entered the wrong password or wrong username. In that situation, then you will call now this use case, the show error message. But if the user enters the correct password or correct username, then you will not show an error message anymore. That's what this means. So the extend relationship means that the parent use case will only call or will only run the child use case in specific situations or if certain criteria are met. Okay, so that is the include and extend relationship. The last part here is showcasing how you write a use case diagram. So you'll notice that there's a box here, and inside that box we have the use cases. So in a use case diagram, the box here represents your system. In other words, if let's say you have an enrollment system, this represents your enrollment system. So everything inside, all of the use cases are the components of your enrollment system. And then outside, the actors are represented here or shown here. So in this case, the student. Take note, the use case in the use case diagram, the actor is always placed outside the diagram or outside the box, and the use cases are always placed inside the box. Okay, and as you can see here, since the student will be able to add, drop, or update an information in their student information sheet, they will be able to make use of the lines here. Okay, all right, so let's go over now some examples. So let us create a use case diagram for a food delivery app. So how will that work? So when you create a use case diagram, you always take note first of what actions and what actors are involved in your system. So let's start off with the actors. Let us have one actor for this example. This actor will be our customer. So the customer will be the person who will interact with our application. What are some actions then, or what are some use cases that our actor can perform? Obviously, in the app, the user can log in. Let's make the text a bit bigger. So the user can log in. Another thing that the user can do is that they can browse. So they can browse for, they can browse for specific items or specific menu items in their app. So they can check which restaurants are open, what menu items are available, and so on. Another thing that they can do is that they can add food to their cart. So obviously the user will be able to add, or they'll be able to place multiple orders from multiple restaurants, or they can place multiple orders for one restaurant depending on what they prefer. So that is another action that the user can perform. The user can also make or finalize their order. So obviously, once they have decided on the items that they would like to get, they will now check out. They'll place their address, they'll place their name, contact information, and so on. That is what we mean by make order. And lastly, they will set the payment. So in other words, what payment options will they choose? Will they do cash on delivery? Will they do credit card payments or debit card payments, and so on? So these are now the actions that our user can perform. Oops, this is supposed to be browse. There we go. So these are the actions that our user can perform. So how will we turn that now into a use case diagram? So we will simply draw now the use cases needed for these 5 actions. So we will draw 5 use cases, or 5 ellipse or oblongs. So let's draw the first one here. There we go. So we'll draw 5 of these. Let's make this a bit thinner. Okay. Copy, and then let's paste it 5 times. So the first one is for the login use case, the second is for the browse use case, the third is for adding a food to the cart, the fourth is for making an order, and the fifth is for setting a payment. And then let us add 2 more here. There we go, which we will demonstrate what they're for in a moment. Okay, as much as possible, try to have a consistent size. I am simply doing this in order to maximize the space here. I simply reduce the size of the use case here to maximize our space. Okay, so what will happen, or how will we write now our use cases? We will simply copy these and then rewrite them here in the different boxes, or the different oblongs rather. So we have login. Let's make the size of that a bit bigger. There we go. We have login. We have browse. Let's try to be a bit specific. Browse resto. There we go. You can browse for a restaurant, or you can browse the different restaurants available. You can add food. Let's just say add food to simplify it. So add food to your cart, and then you can make order. And then lastly, you can set payment. There we go. So these are now our 5 use cases, and then we will now draw a line to connect the customer with the use case. So here's our first use case, second use case, third use case, fourth use case, and fifth use case. Okay, so we're pretty good so far. We now have use cases for, or we have a connection between all the use cases and our actor. What about these two then? So as I mentioned before, let us use this as a way to demonstrate how to place the extend and include relationships. So we'll simply use the examples we had earlier. So verify password. Let's have that be in a bigger font. There we go. And let us have this can be show error message. There we go. So this is now our food delivery app. Obviously, we need to connect these two first before we finalize the use case. So log in and show error message. Again, if you're going to connect these use cases, you have to make use of broken lines or arrow with the broken or dashed lines. So we'll do that here. Oops, pointing to the there. Okay, so this tells us that these two use cases will run along with the login use case, but we have to specify, is this an extend or include relationship? So in the case of verify password, since we want this to always run if the user logs in, we'll place include, and then here we want this to only run if the user enters the wrong password, so we'll place extend. Let's put it here. There we go. So this is now our use case diagram. So as seen here, the customer will be able to log in, browse restaurants, add food, make orders, set payments, and they'll be able to whenever they log in, the system will check their password, and if their password is incorrect, then they will show an error message. Okay, that is creating a use case diagram for a system, for a mobile app, let's say in this case. What about if we'll make it for something that isn't necessarily a mobile app or a software? So here's another example. In this case, I'll make use of 2 actors, and we'll have 5 use cases here. So let's say we have a library, not a library system or a library app, just a library, an actual library. So what are some actions that you can do in the library? Obviously, you can arrange the books, you can add books, you can remove books. Let's say you can also borrow books, and you can return books. So let's place that here, or let's place it here for now. Okay, so these are the actions that your user can perform, or your users can perform. Who are our users, or who are our actors? So we'll have 2. We will have obviously our librarian, and then we can have, let's say, our patrons or customers. So what we'll be demonstrating here is how the 2 actors here will be can interact with different use cases in your system. So library, what can you do in the library? You can arrange the books. So let's place that as one of the use cases. Arrange books. This will be our first use case. Let's increase the size of the text there. There we go. Our actors can obviously add books as well. We can also remove books. We can also borrow books. And lastly, we can return the books. So that is our 5 use cases. Let's remove this one here so it's a little less distracting. So since we've already written down the different use cases, and let's just do that. Oops, that was the wrong tool. Okay, sorry about that. Alright, so how will we draw the relationship between these 2? Let us specify. So the librarian obviously, we should use a solid line. The librarian will obviously be able to arrange books. They can also add books, and they can remove books. But will the librarian usually be the one to borrow or return the books? No, that will be the actions that the patron can perform. So the patron will be able to borrow or return books. So that is the another example of a use case diagram. As you can see here we have two actors which are connected to 5 use cases. Again, as mentioned earlier, the actors do not have to necessarily interact with all use cases here. So in that case, you can specify it like this. So two are performed by the patrons, 3 are performed by the librarians. Okay? Again, this example was to demonstrate not only how to have multiple actors, but to show that use case diagrams are not limited to just only making or not only showcasing the process of software. They can also be used for non-IT or non-software related processes or systems. Okay, so hopefully this was informative. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.